Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of For What It's Nerd. Today we are discussing Doctor Who, the new, well, how do we put it? The new season of the old show that's also a reboot, but isn't. I don't know quite to describe it. Basically, the show's starting fresh with Shooty Gatwa, of course, as we all know. But this is like a new stepping off point for the show as well, again, as most of us know by this point. But I think it's worth re-mentioning just in case anyone's watching this for the first time, not knowing too much about Doctor Who, which is actually the first great point about these episodes, this first two episodes of the new season, the new series, however you want to put it. And that is that the show really does set the stage very quickly as to what Doctor Who is about without overwhelming the audience. You know, there's a scene manufactured very much in the first episode that lays out kind of what the Doctor's about. And then like you get a little bit more of that throughout the first episode, and then in the second episode you get a little bit more of the same. And I think that was a really good way of bringing new audiences to Who and kind of giving that backstory without really feeling like you're getting a lot, because you could have very much have had like a I'm the Doctor intro, this is blah 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 blah, like kind of like they did with the specials, the three specials with David Tennant that happened before this. To be fair, that was still a relatively good way of introducing the Doctor. I think I actually said that when I was reviewing that special specifically. But I think this was also a really good way of doing it, and it gets you up to speed. It gives you the emotional depth for the Doctor. It allows you to understand what he's about without kind of going too in depth, going too far, talking about everything all at once. It was really interesting, though, talking on the other side of that the second episode set in 1963, they go back and they're dealing with the Beatles and music in general. Kind of like the loss of music. And 1963 is the year that the Doctor is kind of with Susan in his first iteration in London at the time as well. So it's a really interesting one where you get that kind of, and there's a reference to that, and he discusses Susan, discusses that Susan might no longer be alive. And I think that was an interesting one because I think on one hand that's nodding to the fans who obviously know Susan, who are aware of Susan, especially because a lot of that not a lot, all of it is on, well, nearly all of it. The first episode technically isn't on BBC, but all the rest are. And so you can see, you can very much go back and watch all of the old Doctor Who now. So it kind of makes sense that they referenced it in that way. But the fact that they kind of imply that she might be dead, I found quite interesting, because I wonder if it's them kind of saying, you know, like, we're not really looking to kind of bring back people that often this time around, or at least not straight away. We're not really looking into that. Like, we want you guys to know that we do still care about what's come before, but we're going forward. We're forging a new path. And I think that's really, really interesting as regards the plot that seems to be overarching for the season, though, because there's two main plots that are going on at the moment, and they seem to be interlinked somehow. But you have Ruby Sunday, you have her, who's her mother, who's her parents, and it looks like it's going to be a big reveal. It looks like probably you're looking at some kind of Time Lord situation. Personally, I believe. Maybe not necessarily. Maybe it's a previous companion, and maybe I'm kind of that whole conversation I've just said about them not bringing people back is kind of actually a sort of red herring in a way. Maybe Ruby is some kind of relation to the Doctor, even. Maybe that's kind of the implication here. Who knows? But with all that said, the villains of, or like the overarching villain, it seems, for this season are kind of, whilst maybe not the offspring of the Toymaker, so to speak, even though one offspring of the Toymaker has shown up so far, is more like relations to the Toymaster, like Toymaker. Sorry, getting my names mixed up. And like I think there was the one who waits, and the oldest one. Apparently, the oldest one is somehow linked to Ruby Sunday's birth. So, what's interesting though is, are these gods, as the Doctor kind of implied in the episode, or are they actually some kind of Time Lord? And in fact, even more interesting than that, if they're not Time Lords specifically, are they the race that the Doctor initially comes from, which is still being kept as canon very much in this show so far? There was reference to that very, very straight up. Not that it wouldn't have been canon otherwise, so to speak, but that it might have been glossed over, similar to how midichlorians were glossed over in Star Wars until recently, which is ironic. Yeah, I think there's a lot kind of to dig into there. As regards the episodes themselves, don't get me wrong, I'm really actually interested about the overarching plot. I don't know if the episodes themselves were my favorite ever Doctor Who episodes. The first one felt very Who, you know, going to the station abandoned. There's a problem. There's a monster lurking. There's kind of this Overwatch kind of character, this kind of character who's watching over what everyone's doing, and like that felt very Who. Don't get me wrong, the space babies kind of angle was very different. I think that was very how do I put it? What's the word? It was very whimsical. I think that's something that is true of this episode and the second episode, which is the Devil's Chord, which kind of has a similar kind of whimsy to it, especially at the end. There's a dance number. I'm going to be honest, and I think personally, I think the whimsy's slightly too much for me for Doctor Who. But Doctor Who is built on whimsy, and they're trying new things. It's a new like era for the show. Why not try it? See how it goes. Ncuti's Doctor is very different to a number of the Doctors we've had previously, so I can't like kind of fault it. But like for example, the dance number, I'm kind of like, so how is that explainable? Like, do you know what I mean? It's like you couldn't like, for example, it's funny that this comes up because recently I've been watching Star Trek, Strange New Worlds. I was catching up on that. I've finished. I'm caught up now, which is very exciting for when season 3 eventually comes around. But yeah, Strange New Worlds. They did a musical episode, and don't get me wrong, it was so clear that they just wanted to do a musical episode and would do anything to kind of make that happen. That's fine. But I think they really did a good job of explaining it through the episode. They made everyone kind of go, what the hell's going on? Why am I singing like this? And it was the problem of the episode, so to speak. I think if they wanted to do some kind of dance number in this, I think you could have very much had a moment where the villain of the episode, Maestro, kind of like through either by way of explanation about their plans or whatever, could have introduced this, like something similar to how the Toymaker did it, right? You know, that kind of like the puppet show, kind of something similar to that kind of like use their powers as way of explanation, kind of to give a little bit of spectacle, especially because, don't get me wrong, the first episode had a little bit of action, not insane amounts of action, but episode 2 basically didn't. Like a lot of it was just talking, and like there was like and going back to Star Trek again, talking's fine. I don't mind talking through problems. I think sometimes it's actually a really interesting angle, especially because a lot of shows these days are all about shoot your way out of the problem, fight your way out of the problem, etc. So I like something that's a little bit more cerebral. I think this episode, these episodes are that. But I think that you could have been a little bit more you could have made the story better and also not just kind of put a little not weird dance number on the end. It was arguably quite catchy, the song that they did for the end, but like it felt like kind of out of place. It felt tacked on, and it kind of was that. They kind of made a reference to that even, and so it was like, if you're going to do that, why not make it a little bit more intrinsic to the episode, you know, rather than like almost like a skit at the end of the episode. Speaking of that, interestingly enough, next time looks like it's going to be a totally different change of pace again. This one, they're going into a war, and it looks like it's almost like it's going to be more of an understated episode, because it looks like the Doctor steps on some type of IED, and it looks like they're kind of like dealing with the trauma of that, which actually is a really interesting idea. Having this episode that's almost, I mean, obviously we don't know how it's going to exactly go, but if this is an episode that's really a lot more like singular in tone and kind of like really focuses in on the Doctor and Ruby and kind of like them trying to get out of this really, really simple situation, but that's so grave and so dire if they get it wrong, right? I think that'd be really interesting as a piece of television. And again, something that Doctor Who, don't get me wrong, it's done stuff like it's done more kind of thoughtful pieces before, but I think not necessarily something akin to that. And I think that'll be really cool. It reminds me of an episode of, I know this sounds very weird too. Well, it's not in terms of like production, because the BBC has done something similar before in EastEnders, which a lot of you guys might not know, but it's a British soap opera. And there was an episode with a character, Dot Branning, where she has like this whole monologue episode. She has this one episode where she's just kind of in her house and like monologuing and kind of like discussing and kind of contemplating on a lot of different things that are going on in her life. And I don't remember the exact episode exactly. I remember that it happened. I remember that it was very well received because it was almost like artful in its way, right? But I think that's something that you could be quite interesting for Doctor Who. You know, constantly running in Doctor Who, and I think that's great and that's fun. But I think sometimes it would be nice to just do a little stop and kind of check in and kind of, especially now that we're in a new era of Doctor Who. Gosh, I can't say certain words today. We're in a new era of Doctor Who. Let's kind of amp that up. Let's, you know, the whimsy doesn't always need to be the way to amp things up, right? You can go a little bit more dramatic. Let's go a little bit more dramatic. I mean, Doctor Who has done that before, and sometimes I think that's some of the best stuff it does. You know, so we'll see how that goes. But yeah, Doctor Who will be out every week now. So I obviously don't necessarily, with shows, when we watch it when they're coming out, I don't do like a review on them every single week. We'll probably come back at the finale now to discuss the rest of the season. As you know, I like to do kind of like the intro and the end of the season, unless there's something like massively important in between. But yeah, so I think it was a success. I think, don't get me wrong, these episodes didn't feel like their strongest Doctor Who episodes ever. But then again, most Doctor Who seasons, I wouldn't say my favorite episodes were ever the starting episodes. In fact, most shows in general, I'd never say my favorite episodes are the starting episodes. But yeah, so I think we'll come back to this very, in due course, and I'm very excited to see what the rest of the season holds, especially as regards Ruby and the progeny or otherwise relations of the Toymaker. So I did say that right, didn't I? I'm getting confused. Toymaker, Toymaster, Toymaker, right? Toymaster, I think, was a star at one point. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching and listening. As always, I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know your opinions on the beginning of this new era of Doctor Who, and I'll see you guys again very soon for more. Bye, guys.